So let's talk about the 2026 estate tax exemption sunset. So up to this point, we've been working under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that President Trump put in place, but we know that that act is going to be sunsetting at the end of this year. Why does that matter to you? Well, under the current rules, an individual can pass $13.99 million to the next generation without estate tax. If you're married, you can double that to $27.98 million. That means that basically you can give your kids or the next generation $28 million tax-free. However, every dollar above that is going to be taxed at 40%. So if you're a high net worth family or entrepreneur, you need to be careful with this number because included in this number is your real estate assets, your investment accounts, your cash, and probably your biggest asset, which is your business. So right now, $28 million sounds like a big number, and it is. But we know that on 12/31 of 2025, that number is going to drop pretty significantly. So what we know is that on January 1st of 2026, that exemption amount is going to be cut in half. You're only going to be able to give about $6 or $7 million per person if you're married, 12 to 14 million to the next generation. So why is this important? Well, it's important because if your largest asset is your company, every dollar above 14 million is going to be taxed at 40%. And the IRS wants cash as their payment. So if you own a $50 million business and you can only give $14 million to the next generation, that's $36 million that's going to be taxed at the current estate tax rate of 40%. This is significant because a lot of times without proper planning, it causes the next generation to fire sell all of your assets, including your business, and it can cripple your business and end it right there. This isn't a hypothetical. This is actually what's going to happen. Now, there's a lot of conjecture in Senate and in the House about whether or not Trump will extend this, but for right now, for what we know today, it's scheduled to happen. So what do we do about it? Well, we need to be proactive. You need to be working with a family office who has an estate planning team ready to work on your case specifically. One of the biggest benefits to creating an estate plan today in regard to estate tax is that any decisions that you make today cannot be clawed back by future law changes. What that means is that if you give away assets today at the current high exemption level, the IRS can't come back and say, well, the level is a lot less now. We want to claw back that money. No, it's in stone. So there's a lot of strategies that you can employ to do this, and we'll talk about a few today. So one of the first strategies we start talking about is the use of irrevocable trusts. Irrevocable trusts are set up, they're pretty permanent, and they're a way to push assets or gift assets to a trust that is held outside of your taxable estate. So the act of gifting will count against your lifetime exemption. However, whatever growth that those assets have after it's outside of your estate will be considered tax-free when it comes to estate tax. If you gift $14 million to a trust and that $14 million turns into $50 million over the next 30 years, none of that will be subject to estate tax. So that's a huge benefit there. There are also things called dynasty trusts or legacy trusts. These are complex trusts where you set up an irrevocable trust and you actually sell your assets to that trust. Now you have a note that's considered still in your estate that you can pay down over time, but the bulk of those appreciating assets are considered outside of your estate. This type of trust allows you to still access that money and benefit from it while you're alive, while simultaneously pushing those assets outside of your estate. There's another type of trust called an irrevocable life insurance trust, called an ILIT. Now this is a trust where you own a life insurance policy in an irrevocable trust that is outside of your estate. Now you have to gift premiums into that trust, but the cash benefit that's created when you die can be used by your next generation to pay the estate tax. So this one can be a little costly depending on your health, depending on your underwriting status, but it's a pretty powerful tool for estate planning. The biggest thing to consider is if you haven't had this conversation with your family office or with your financial advisor about what you should do about your estate tax, you need to get moving. Right now, we know that at the end of 2025, this change in the estate tax exemption amount is going to happen. So the faster you can get started on this, the better. You don't want to be waiting until 12/31 to try and set these things up because frankly, it's probably not possible. These are complex trusts that take some time to set up. So if you're on the fence of whether or not to get started, you need to be asking your financial advisor about this. And frankly, your financial advisor should be asking you about this. This is part of their job. So when we talk about giving assets to an irrevocable trust or pushing assets outside of your estate, there's a common question of, well, what assets do I put there, right? So typically the way we look at it is you want to put your highest appreciating assets in these types of irrevocable trusts and get them outside of your estate, or maybe assets that you don't want to ever liquidate. Things like a business, things that are highly illiquid by nature, real estate investments, businesses, things like that. You want to have those protected in a trust outside of your estate. Even better if you can use a dynasty trust or a legacy trust to push everything outside of your estate. That's likely the best scenario for you, but usually you want assets that are going to appreciate significantly. Well, why is that? If an asset's worth $10 million today, and we know that, we want to gift that or sell that asset to a trust at today's value. In 10 years, hopefully that $10 million asset is worth 20, 30, 40 million. But all of that growth, right? All of the growth above the 10 million is going to be outside of your estate and not subject to gift or estate tax. Sure, you might use $10 million of your exemption today to push that asset out. However, all of the growth beyond that is going to go to your heirs tax-free. Another great strategy for estate tax is gifting. We call this giving while living. Right? So right now you've got about $28 million as a married couple to give to the next generation. A lot of times we tell clients, hey, if you're financially free and you have adult children that maybe have children or you have grandchildren, give that money away in increments throughout the year. You can use an annual gift that's not even subject to the exclusion amount and give your kids and your grandkids money each year. And we like to call it giving while living because it's unique in that you can see the impact that that money had for your family while you're still alive. Sure, it's great to give your kids $5, $10, $15 million after you die, but you're dead and gone. You don't get to see the impact or the happiness or the freedom that that created for them. It's a cool situation when you can give your kids money and then see them take cool vacations with their kids, your grandkids, or maybe you take the whole family on vacation on your dollar, right? Those are impact type of gifts and memories that are created where you would never get to experience that if they just got a huge amount of money after you die. One question we get often is what happens if this law doesn't change, or what happens if Trump extends it even further? And our response is typically that's great, right? We have to act on the set of rules and laws that we know today. If Trump decides to extend this increased exemption amount even longer, that's amazing, right? At least you did the planning, because in the opposite scenario, when the law does change and he doesn't extend it, you're going to be wishing that you took advantage of today's high exemption amount. All of this means that you need to have an in-depth conversation with your family office about your estate tax and about your estate plan. Your family office needs to be reviewing your estate plan every single year. And they need to have a savvy estate planning attorney that knows about these creative trusts, knows how to set them up, and knows how to implement them. That's really the most important part of this. This isn't on you as the client to know everything about this, but you need the professionals in your life that do.